Well, welcome to episode 13 of ScottCast, the podcast. Sitting here with Scott Brown. I'm Michael Clark. We're going to talk a little bit about when life, throws you a curveball. Especially when it comes to, I would say, finances and retirement. There are certain things with finances that are good. Like winning the lottery, selling a business.
That's a good thing. Well, sometimes it's not such a good thing, but we can talk about it in another episode.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a rough time, but when you inherit money, however, a lot of times in life it goes the other way, where something unexpected happens, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of questions in our financial planning practice a lot lately with people that are laid off unexpectedly, and they're asking us, "Hey, what do we do? What do I do now? I was expecting to work till age 65, 66, fill in the blank, and now I'm 63. And this plan that we had in place isn't exactly what I was expecting." So I thought we'd talk through just that thought process.
Well, it's a difficult. It's not one I've experienced personally, but I've watched it happen to people and to clients, and
Sure.
I think that the because of what we do, because we're financial planners, we've probably talked to a lot of these people in advance of this event, not to plan for that event because you don't really see that coming,
Right.
But we've taken the time to say, okay, well, we're saving this much, we have this much, these are our goals, we want to retire at 66, we want to take full Social Security, Medicare, we'll take care of our health insurance costs for the most part, maybe plus or minus a supplement. So you've sat down and you've gone through that. Now what's happened is somebody has thrown a monkey wrench into your system, right?
Yeah.
So now you're not retiring 66 probably because you were laid off at 62. Now we could get into, there are other jobs and what other things could you do? Could you work part-time? Whatever. But assuming that isn't true, then yes, now we have a problem, right? Because we have 3 years less savings. In my hypothetical example, 4 years less savings, 4 years less to have the money grow, and 4 years more to take income.
Sure.
Right? So if we expected to live to be 83.7, whatever the mortality table says, I have it memorized, if we thought that and we were going to retire at 66, we had whatever that is, 13, 17 years. Now we have 20 years or 21 years that money has to last us. So to your point, things have changed. And I think that what needs to happen immediately is that conversation. We need to go back to the drawing board and redefine what success is, because success was, hey, Michael, I'm going to retire at 66. I make $100,000 a year. I think 80 will work in retirement. I've saved $642,000. I expect to. Well, now success, maybe 80,000 can't be the thing anymore. Maybe
Right.
it's 70 or 65. With the possibility to get a part-time job or something like that.
Sure.
So the planning, you have to go back to the planning and say, this plan, as sweet as it was, as well thought out as it was, and as much time as we put into it, we got to revisit this.
Yeah, and it can be a real shock, because you have that plan, we'll say 66, you have that set in your mind, you've been planning for it, and you've been looking forward to it, and unfortunately, a lot of times, it's not even in your control.
Right.
And that's something that you've seen a lot of, where people just try to control everything from the investments to the outcomes. And I would say it's real true on the investing side, where people want to control everything with their investments.
Every outcome. Well, people don't like unknowns, right? They
Right.
don't like the ambiguity of what we do.
Yeah.
What we do is more art than it is science.
Sure.
And people like to believe that, I always joke about engineers, right? Because an engineer walks into your office, they expect that 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4, right? Look, I've got the calculator, I did the math, here's the algorithm. No.
Right.
There is no algorithm, right? 2 + 2 in our business equals 7 and -4 sometimes. And that blows people's minds, there is no algorithm. And that's also true of life. We can get all philosophical here, but to your point on being laid off, right? You were going to work to 66. That was the plan. It was written down. It was on paper. And then somebody said, I don't give a crap.
Right.
You're not working till 66, right? So like investing, like life, you have to be able to adjust. And what people struggle with, I find, is that when somebody does throw a monkey wrench into their plan, and first of all, kudos for having a plan, right? Because most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people just go, man, I hope this works out. I'm
Right.
saving some money. I have a 401k. I'd like to go to Europe 3 times a year when I retire. No, I have no idea how that's going to happen, right? So kudos to that person who has the plan. In your description of events, many of the people you're talking to right now did have a plan.
Right.
That plan isn't valid anymore. So you have to be able to adjust. It's like saying, if the market earns 8% a year for the next 20 years, I'll have X. And then it doesn't, because it probably won't.
Right.
It might earn 7, it might earn 15 for all I know. But you have to be able to adjust. And, there's a chapter in my book and where I talk about men and women. And not to be segregating people into categories, just a generalization, is that what I find oftentimes with many of my male clients is they have the, I'm going to grab it, wrestle it to the ground, and beat it to death mentality when it comes to investing, right? They won't allow the process to happen. It's like a golf swing. When you golf, for the golfers out there, if you hold on to the club too tight, the club face can't turn over, and if the club face can't turn over, I don't care how strong you are. I don't care if you're the Rock. The ball's not going anywhere, right? Whereas you got little 5'8" Justin Thomas, who has the loosest grip. The club's almost fallen out of his hands, and he's hitting it 320 yards down the middle of the fairway because he allows the club to release. And when it comes to investing and when it comes to changing up investment plan, this analogy's gotten completely away from me, but when it comes to changing an investment plan, people hang on way too tight.
Sure, absolutely. And a lot of it depends upon going back to getting laid off unexpectedly before your retirement date.
Right.
It depends on the age, because if it's below 59 and a half, that magic age with the IRS, 59 and a half, there can be some taxes and penalties, and I would say it's even worse in some scenarios, where if it's after 59 and a half, at least there's that saving grace of the 10% tax penalty going away.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the earlier the worse it is, right?
Sure,
and you get into that little zone of ambiguity where, I'm 58, I was only going to work 6 more years, and now what do I do? It's not like you're 48 where you're like, I got to get another job. There's just no two ways about it. There's some, I'm not quite sure what to do. And if, like you said, at 58, how do you bridge that gap to 59 and a half without incurring a 10% penalty on your IRA or qualified assets, right?
Sure.
So that's a consideration. And there are ways. There are things you can do. And that's part of the planning discussion, is to say, I've got this pot of money, Michael. More or less you would say this to them. You've got this pot of money that's $200,000, and it's an IRA, and we'd prefer you don't use that, because if that's more expensive money. For every dollar I give you out of this account, not only are you going to pay 30 cents in income tax, but you're going to pay another 10 cents in tax penalty, basically. So now that dollar turns into 60 cents when it hits your mailbox. Versus, hey, no, Scott, instead of that, let's look at this non-qualified money. This money, remember you inherited this money a few years ago, and there's $100,000. Let's try to subsidize ourselves from 58 to 59 and a half on this non-qualified, non-IRA type money, so that we can avoid some, not all, but some of the taxes that are involved, and it's less expensive money.
Yeah.
And there obviously are other considerations as well.
Sure. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the tax side of it there. It depends upon the age. 59 and a half is, obviously kind of a key driver, key age when it comes to anything dealing with retirement, 401k, IRA, 403b. So that's a key age. Let's talk a little bit about health insurance, because that's another, I would say, big area of concern for people retiring. And it's even a bigger thing if you get laid off, again, say at age 62, because now you're delaying all the way, 65 might have been earmarked for Medicare. So there's a conversation we're having with people on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but health insurance is expensive. Right. This apparently is a thing. Yeah. These people in Washington, D.C. like to argue about it quite a bit without resolving it. So the rest of us have to deal with that. And like you said, if you're 62 even and get laid off, now you've got a 3-year gap to Medicare, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with that? First, there's COBRA. There's a variety of ways you can deal with it. There's private, just go out and buy it. Catastrophic insurance. So I'm not a health insurance expert, but that is a problem. So understanding first and foremost that dynamic, because if you're 62, I'm 55, stuff goes wrong, right? You need to see a doctor from time to time. And you certainly don't want to be caught in a situation where you have a $20,000 health insurance issue that isn't covered by health insurance. Yeah. So that is something that immediately needs to be addressed. And I would say more often than not, my experience has been that someone who gets laid off will have COBRA options to at least get them through the initial few months to figure out that dynamic and whether they're going to get another job or they're going to find a way to go on their wife's or their husband's, their significant other's health insurance. So from the qualified money issue below 59.5 to the health insurance issue from anything below 65, that's a thing. And then, of course, there's Social Security as well. Yeah, and Social Security is a big range, anywhere from age 62 all the way to age 70. So that's an 8-year window where a lot of strategies certainly come into play. And I think a lot of times, especially with financial advice and financial planning practices, I feel like this conversation isn't had as clearly as we're having it right now. Yeah. They look at it more like, all right, well, let me tell you which is better, Apple stock or Microsoft. Right. It's not looking at it as holistically as this conversation's going, again, from the taxes to Medicare to Social Security. And one of the options or one of the conversations we certainly have with people is, all right, you were laid off at 62. Do we access Social Security? Does that make sense given your situation? Yes or no? And to go back to your original point, well, we run the numbers and we take a look at it and see yes or no. Yeah, I mean, that's the irony, right, is that people, human beings, want control of a situation. And so they come into our office and they want to control, they want to own whatever's happening in the process, and all they want to talk about is the first part, Microsoft versus Apple, which is the least controllable portion of our conversation, right? Well, I don't know. How's Bill Gates doing today? I don't really know. What is controllable to some degree is the decisions you make administratively with regard to Medicare and Social Security and things like that. So this is where algorithms, real math comes into play. Now, there is some ambiguity in Social Security in that nobody knows how long they're going to live. So that's beyond my control. But so then you're sitting in an office with someone who's 62 or 63 years old, and the conversation will be like, well, I guess I got to take Social Security. Okay, well, let's look at that. Right. Your full age Social Security is 66 years and 8 months, and you would get $2,455. But if you take it at 62 or 63, it might be $1,650, right? I'm making these numbers up. Today, that seems like a good idea to take the $1,650 to supplement what your issue, your problem you're having today. But if you live to be 90, it will have turned out to have been a bad decision. It could cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, again, we don't know how long we're going to live. I would say the knee-jerk reaction to the situation you're describing where somebody's laid off is like, oh, that's it. 62, I'm taking it. Yeah. Let's not be so quick to do that. I'm not saying it's the wrong decision. It could very well be the correct decision. What I'm saying is you need to holistically look at what you have, where it is, what the tax implications are, the exhaustibility of that money if you didn't take Social Security, because what you and I both know is that every year you don't take it is worth about 7 or 8% a year to you in guaranteed earnings. Sure. So the most brilliant of financial advisors amongst us, which nobody ever says that about me, but amongst us, cannot guarantee you 8%, right? If they do, they're a quack, right? So understanding that dynamic without, again, allowing your emotions, which you're going to be very emotional at this moment, right? Because somebody just smacked you upside the head with a 2x4. To take a deep breath and say, all right, talk to somebody, meet with somebody. This is where financial advisors earn their money. Because again, the Microsoft Apple thing was what everybody thinks. Well, he's going to tell me which stock's going to double next week. Yeah. We've been over this. That is not where they earn their money. Where they earn their money is the planning and taking the emotion out of the conversation to build out a process that makes sense, whether it's Microsoft or Apple. right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
yes, that is a conversation certainly worth having.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the emotion side of it. Just, you're going through a huge tumultuous time in your life when you get laid off from a job, and I put it in the same boat as inheritance. You lost a loved one, and you're coming into a lump sum of money in some cases, or a divorce. There's big money implications through all three of those really negative situations. And so if you have any idea for a future ScottCast, the podcast, we'd love to hear it. You can shoot Scott an email. It's scott.brown@raymondjames.com. Again, Scott Brown, Michael Clark. This was episode 13 of ScottCast, the podcast.
Tell me now, like you told me back then, that we'll be together